Good evening and welcome to episode 22 of the Above Average Joe's podcast. I'm your host Kyle, and with me as always is Heath and Matt.
Hello.
How you
Good
guys
day,
do-
mate.
How you guys doing tonight?
Pretty good. You?
Oh, it's the start of another week of Groundhog Week, but guess it is what it is at this point, right?
What do you do? What do you do?
What do you do is exactly
Yeah,
right.
we're getting acclimated to it. I think everybody's doing better and better.
Yeah, we're
I don't know.
making it through.
You could bitch about it, but who's really gonna fucking do anything?
Or listen.
Who really cares?
Or
right?
listen. Exactly. But
Find the
moving-
bright side.
on the bright side, we have some actual sport to talk about this week, like actual sports, not just talking
blood
about
sport.
maybe sports. One
What?
sport. That's still some sports, man. That's something that has actually happened in an actual sport. So we're pretty excited about that. And there's a
Yes.
few, but there's plenty of other things we can talk about this week. So Heath, why don't you
Yeah.
give us the rundown of today's show for us?
Now we'll make it real quick. CFL. We're going to talk a little bit of season or no season, deal or no deal, bailout or no bailout. Then we'll talk UFC. It was a pretty good show for all intents and purposes, but there's a few questions and a couple things that kind of happened. We'll go through all that. And NHL news, a couple of little things. The Ontario government said it's okay for the pro sports teams to get back into facilities, but even bigger story was Brandon Leipsic and him getting waived for a few texts that got unearthed and they put out into the media circles. So with the other one, then we're going to jump to the NFL. Dave Portnoy of Barstool and Goodell are going to be splitting a bowl of Cheetos for a Monday Night Football game if we get to that point sometime later this year. And that shit better be broadcast live. We'll go over that too. And then we'll finish up the show on some NBA stuff. Zion's former agency, there's a lawsuit going on and all that kind of stuff. And it could be exposing a little bit of the underbelly of the NCAA once again in a different way. But some funds may have exchanged hands illegally. All fun stuff.
All great stuff.
Yeah, for not really having much in the sporting world in terms of live events, there's sure a lot of shit to talk about.
Certainly. And some really exciting, I think will be really good talk with some of these stories.
And a lot of them were saying just before we got on live here was like there's a few of these subjects, they've got some multiple layers. It's not just here it is, a couple of people. Like there's different angles, different takes, different thought process, different ideas. So anyway, we'll get to the first one, CFL. CFL commissioner is basically campaigning, hoping, praying, begging that he can maybe get a little money out of the federal government to salvage the season. Last figure I had heard, correct me if I'm wrong, was 50 million. That would be
I believe it was
now, I guess, or for the
30
entire
million
season,
for
or-
now and 120 more if the season is canceled for a total of 150.
Okay, there you go. So should it be given? I've heard various different people say yes, no, whatever. Why or why not? Things like that. And are they going to actually go to a different format? The CFLPA and the CFL kind of seem to be back talking again. And are they actually going to get together and formulate a plan of hosting all the games in two cities, say, or shortening the schedule, or how that's going to look, or how guys get paid, or so anyway. But let's get into the first step of it, I guess, is the federal government bailout, I guess, if you will, or not too sure. I've heard people say like, no, we shouldn't be bailing out pro sports. Sort of the same people who said you probably shouldn't use public funds to build a stadium, right?
Right.
Obviously, guys who maybe aren't sports fans or just feel like their tax dollars need to go to other areas maybe that they deem more important or feel are more vital to society. So, I don't know. To me,
So why
It's a slippery.
don't we start by just going around the table, the three of us, who
Sure.
would, with what they've asked, who would, if they were the government, who would bail out? I would bail them out, or whatever it is, whether it's a loan or whatever. I would definitely help the league survive. What about you, Heath?
Myself?
Yeah.
Well, the federal government did just roll out some news about, help for some larger businesses in terms of supports out there that they were going to put in place to help them out. Well, this is a pretty big business. So they kind of fall under that. Like, I know they're a sports league, but they're a business too, right?
Okay.
So if you're going to
that
help,
sounds
help
kind
other
of like
ones,
a
I
yes
think it's
to me.
hypocritical if you don't help these ones. So that's just my thought. Anyway, Maddie?
Maddie?
Well, if you take, I mean, like, there was the ranchers, I believe, were talking about. They got some funding, some egg, and I think they got about 100 or 150 million, and they were asking for about 800 million. And so they were going, well, yeah, we're happy with the assistance, but I mean, it's not nearly enough. And so, I mean, if you think that that's what we're going to give to our ranchers when that's what they're looking for, we're going to take a professional sports league that loses money on an annual basis and bail them out to the tune of what they actually ask for. I think that would be a cold day in hell. Like, I just can't see that happening. I could see some assistance, but certainly not at the level they're asking for. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well,
Okay.
Comparatively.
So it sounds like you're kind of yes, but with restrictions, or not necessarily the proposal that's on the table.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. They need to, I mean, God, yeah, from what I understood, Randy really didn't even do his homework properly. Didn't have answers for things like, will the players see a share of this money?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you didn't expect that question to come?
Yes, I would agree when you say Randy didn't go into that prepared, and I know he said he was humbled by having to do it, but I guess he wasn't humbled enough to put in the homework it really takes when you actually have to beg somebody for money.
And part of going and asking for that money though too is he hasn't really fully engaged. Like, I mean, he might talk to the clubs and the owners and some of the fans even for that matter, right? But he hasn't engaged the CFLPA. They have a vested interest in it. They're part of the
Absolutely.
product. They're part of
They're
part of the
employees.
business, right?
They're employees, right?
So,
Because as
And
far
I
as
mean-
as far as I can tell, what he did state was this is for the people who work for the teams in the league and so on. Well, the players are your employees also.
Right, and it's a unionized environment. So, I mean, he kind of has to take the union's opinion and at least hear it. He doesn't have to like it. At least he should pursue it and hear it.
Absolutely.
If nothing else, in the name of being actually prepared and having the entire story before he goes and asks for anything.
Right.
Having said that, though, too, like, not everybody is getting what they want. And it's sort of, I don't know about you guys, but I look on, talking to Maddie with the point about, the agriculture industry. I mean, there's numerous industries that are asking for basically full funded bailout money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, that's great. But nobody's promising that you are going to get out of this unscathed. Whether it's the CFL, the ag sector,
Anybody.
the oil sector, whoever it may be.
Entertainment industry, whoever, right.
So, you can have your $2.5 billion like the ag industry asked for. You're not getting all of it. So part of it is the government really responsible to pull everyone's ass out of the fire? Yes and no. But at the same time, whatever happened to taking care of yourself? A proper business plan, you maybe can take care of yourself. The CFL runs a little leaner. We know it's not always a money-making league. So yeah, a little different scenario. But there's some pretty lucrative industries out there who don't seem to have the funds when they should have the funds, right? Like, the old rule is you should have enough in your bank account to cover your bills for 6 months.
I don't think that's how business works these days.
We're going to find out who doesn't, if it gets bad enough.
Yeah. But that's kind of getting a little off the topic. Let's try and keep it more to to just the CFL and their ask, and I'd like to get more on. I think I think even though Matt gave concessions, I think we're all kind of on the side of they need assistance at some of some form, right? So why don't we discuss why we think that the CFL would need assistance to keep going, or why it's important that we keep the CFL going? I guess let's start with Matt.
Honestly, I'm not necessarily certain that it is important that we keep it going, because I think if it folded, it would spring up again in short order in possibly another form or something like that. But I think but yeah, I mean, I get that it's an institution and stuff, but I just have a hard time classifying it as something that we can't allow to fail. I mean, it's a private entity, and it always really has been, right?
That's interesting coming from the guy sitting in front of that backdrop you've got.
Oh, I love the Riders, man. I grew up with the CFL. I love the CFL, and it would break my heart, but at the same sense tells me that, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, everybody's getting bailouts, so yes, absolutely, they should get something. But it's just it's
So in
I guess they're not saying to business A and business B when they're handing out this money right now, your business sucks, so you don't get any because you're not a viable business anyways. But in the case of the CFL, when they come up and basically make the presentation to Parliament and say, look, here's the facts. We're not a viable business to start with, so please help us.
Well, that was probably a mistake. but you're gonna have, that's all gonna come out anyways. So I guess
I think if you're gonna save it, you need to make the cultural argument, right?
Right.
You
well,
have
of
to
course.
talk about what the Grey Cup has meant as a festival for uniting the country and the sort of cultural elements and traditions that are around it, as opposed to trying to sell it on we're an important business, because I'm not sure I necessarily buy that.
Okay, Heath.
In kind of to add to that in some way, shape, or form, I guess, though, too, the CFL is a roughly $800 million a year entity on its own. So 150 million, it isn't like they're going to get completely everything fully funded by the government. It would be a percentage. So even with that money, there'd still be hard decisions to make. Are they the kind of guys who could make the hard decisions? Well, when they're not even talking to the CFLPA, they can't even have the hard conversations, possibly. So can they make the hard decisions?
Well,
you look a little bit like, with a skeptical eye when you see that stuff, in my opinion, or at least I do.
To be fair to the CFL, it is the PA who threatened that if the season was going to cease to exist, all their contracts would become null and void. So therefore, who would they need to pay or talk to? Just to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both of them are kind.
That's not a threat. That's language that's in the contract, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's being used as a threat, to be completely honest. Just some of the messaging and attitude coming out of the PA hasn't been a lot better than what's coming out of the CFL's office.
And is it really a spot where those two entities, like whether the CFL and the CFLPA agree or not, they need each other. One doesn't exist without the other. Like they're tied together. Even if it's an unhappy marriage, you still have to get along for the kids' sake, sort of idea here, right? Like, for them to put those threats in is pretty self-sabotaging in the grand scheme of things.
I think the PA feels like they got bullied, though, in the last CBA a little bit, hey? And so they're probably lashing out a little bit, I
don't know what that feels like at all. Do you, Heath?
Well, if you feel like you're getting bullied, why'd you put the pen to paper?
Yeah, maybe find new leadership.
Right? So whether that's the commissioner needed to be changed out, or the president of the PA needs to be changed out, right? I mean, somehow you got to work on it. But these guys need to talk. They need to be on the same page in terms of, we need a season and we need each other to do it. So right there, it's not really a unified front when they come and ask for help, right? That to me is a little disturbing, and I don't like that. That makes me think that even if they got the money, there would be some way they would fuck it up, because they don't want to work together. Everybody has to work together right now. We're all in it together. You see the commercials, everything else about COVID-19. We're all in it together. Mm-hmm. Well, these guys got to be in it together. But beyond that, though, too, in terms of a bailout, like you said, the cultural fabric of it, $150 million when you're going, how many billions into debt is kind of like a piss in the ocean. Like,
it is.
It's not a lot of money when you compare it to the $252 billion deficit we're going to run this year.
Or the economic drive that the CFL brings to this country.
Right. And how many people spend the extra money, how many restaurants benefit, bars benefit. There's so many angles to what the money that pours out of that league into the communities, into tax coffers, kind of has happened, right? But at the same time, we're as a government, doing $250 billion deficit. How many billions are actually going overseas for all kinds of other things, to totals way beyond 150 million? So, I mean, to me, it sort of gets into that, well, if you're going to ask the Canadian government to give the money as a social fabric of the nation sort of idea, though, too, to keep it intact and keep it running. I mean, the social fabric of our nation matters more to me and you, and I'd rather see my tax dollars spent on that than trying to keep the fabric of another nation intact, right? Like, at a certain point, you got to make hard decisions, even as a government, as a people. I'd rather look after my own.
I would really like somebody to tell me another national event other than maybe Canada Day, but I don't even think that brings together people in the same way from one end of our country to the other more than the CFL and Grey Cup.
Right. Well, it's a cultural fabric thing, right? So in terms of how much they're spending on all kinds of other businesses, large businesses are out there getting potential help, in the form of programming and everything else from the government. 150 million is not actually that, like, it is a lot of money, but it isn't in comparison to what
not in
really
the big scheme of
pouring
things
out for this stuff, right? So, I mean, I don't want to say yes, just blow fucking money like a drunken housewife, but at the same time, we've spent more money on stupider shit. Maybe that's just my argument.
That's very well put.
But you can say that about anything.
Yeah.
Well, true.
It depends what means more to you.
Yeah.
It's about priorities.
Yep.
So it depends on what the CFL means to an individual as to what their opinion is. You could see some differences in what I think or Maddie thinks, but I'd like to hear what Kyle thinks though too. So,
well, if it really means that the league is in jeopardy of like ceasing to exist, not just maybe having to take a couple of years to get back to maybe where we were, I think you have to help them, even if it is the full 150 million that they need. But because to me that they're about as Canadian as you can get, like as far as nationwide things we all kind of have some sort of vested interest in. Even Maritimers who don't even have a team yet seem to show up at Grey Cup and be part of the celebration, right?
Yeah, no, I mean,
like maybe the Briar, but that's not even close to the numbers that.
Oh, well, the Grey Cup, when Saskatchewan has it, and it's always an overwhelming success on every level when it's held here. But we're deeply invested as a community in the CFL, right? So, I mean, it's maybe not the average in a lot of ways, but it's an overwhelming success in a lot of places though too. And the amount of millions of dollars it brings to that local economy alone just from that one game or that one week, it's pretty overwhelming.
Well, that's the thing, though.
So
For the most part, the CFL isn't owned by billionaires like, say, an NFL team or an NBA team or even an NHL team, right? Other than
yeah.
Bob Young, is anybody really, really, really rich? That,
Well,
like,
MLSE, Calgary Sports and Entertainment.
I suppose. Hey, I
Yeah.
forgot
David
that.
Braley.
I forgot that. MLS
Well,
Yeah.
Calgary
bought
and
the
the Argos have pretty deep pockets if they want to. But I mean, I think part of it is too, even within those corporations, they're kind of siloed in each sport. They'd like each of them to basically not have one subsidize the other.
Well,
but I mean,
and they're all in the
you're
same
at a
kind
point
of
now
spot.
you might have to just do that. It's just unprecedented times, so you got to do unprecedented things. So, but no, I mean, in comparison, I think maybe, what Kyle's sort of saying though too is there isn't a single owner in the NFL that isn't a billionaire. Like, they're pretty much all billionaires. So they could suck it up a little bit easier than, a community run franchise like the Riders are,
At the end of the day, this
So-
thing's hard on everybody, every business, every entity. When do you say no, right? Who do you
Well,
say no to?
And that's sort of my point is they're saying yes to all kinds of other stuff. Why not this? It's kind of hypocritical to not in a sense. So, do you think though, if they did get the money, say hypothetically they get the money, what does the season look like? Not just in terms of timeline, but I mean, obviously
What season?
we've learned that they've got to put in some different protocols, right? So
What season? There's no
Do
season
you-
this year.
there's possibilities still. Okay. And
Zero.
the protocols have to be put in place, but I mean, do you put it all in one center? Do you put it all in two centers? Like, I think it's unrealistic to think they're going to get it in every city that has a team.
I think
Sure,
it's
the
a
recommended
100.
hockey protocols.
Oh, those hockey protocols. We got to talk about that.
Ridiculous.
When we get to the
Oh
NHL,
my
we got to talk
God.
about that.
Yeah.
I'm like 99.9% like the Lysol wipes that nobody can buy, sure that we're probably not having a CFL season.
Yeah. And it sounds like Randy Ambrosie's pretty much there too.
I don't think he
Well-
would have asked if he didn't think that was.
Well, I
gonna
believe
happen.
his words were the most
Most
likely
likely
scenario is
yeah.
not playing a season this year.
Which means
And
you're
the
only-
best case scenario is a severely truncated season.
right. So you're only saying that
Yeah.
there might be one just to give some
is it-
optimism, but in the back rooms
Because-
they're figuring out. Okay, now the Riders don't get their Grey Cup. Okay, do you get it in 2 years or do you have to wait 3? That's what's going on right now. They're figuring out how to keep the league alive and the logistics to forget about this season and hope they can have one next year.
Right. And I mean, I'm kind of firmly more so in the cap of it's like 65-35 versus, no season versus yes season, And when I say yes, there could be a season 35% chance.
That's really optimistic.
I'm saying it could be 8 games. I'm not saying full season.
Oh no, I think it's
can't
already
do
not
that
going to be a
because
full
they're already
season.
late. But I mean, some abbreviated form of one, I don't know. But I mean, at the same time, they're not even talking, like you see other leagues talking about, well, we're going to have host cities. We're going to have, this. They haven't mentioned a damn thing about how they would pull off a single game even. So, even if other leagues get going around the same time, these guys don't seem to have their shit in order when it comes to how would we even do it if
I don't think they can treat it like these other leagues, Heath, because it is such a community-oriented game. So you say, for example, because we have such low rates in Saskatchewan or in Regina, let's just say that Regina is now the host of all of the Western games. That'd be great for us.
Yeah.
Not very great for Edmonton, Calgary. And you want to talk about a team dying, BC fans, you're now completely cutting them off. Like, I know our fans travel, But I still just can't see how you're going to put fans in a stadium right now. That's the biggest obstacle.
They're putting kids in schools in Quebec.
I thought they pulled back on it today.
They're going ahead. They'll be going ahead.
Oh no,
by
right.
the
That was
time
just
summer
Montreal.
rolls around. Right? So like you wait a month and you're going to put half the kids back in school or even a third. That's pretty much the equivalent of a third of the fans in there. Even if you play with no fans, which will probably be the case in most leagues, if not all leagues, at some point, how are you even going to pull off testing the players, quarantining the players? Like none of this is being put out there by the CFL. I've heard the NHL talk about how they're going about figuring out testing.
I
the
think
NFL,
those
the
leagues
NBA,
are
they're all
more
talking
desperate
about
right now.
CFL's not even talking about it. So even if it is okay in Saskatchewan because of the low numbers, how are you going to ensure safety? That is not a 2-hour discussion. They're not even having it. So they're already kind of fucked, even if they do have the ability to go ahead and have a game, minus fans. And in terms of the CFL, there's 9 places you got to figure out. How the hell are you going to do it when you've got a league like the NFL saying, we're going to go ahead? They've got 30 plus teams, in 27 different states, I think it is, or 26 states. 26 different regions have to be good to go. We got to worry about 9. Well, how are they going to pull it off?
I
They're
don't
already
think they're
talking
pull
how
it
they're
off
going to
either.
test and how they're going to quarantine and how, they're working out the logistics. You've got to at least have the conversation. That's why I'm less optimistic on the CFL than I am other leagues, because they're not even having that conversation. Player safety is something they always talk about in terms of headshots. This is still player safety.
Mm-hmm.
You're not even talking about it. So,
well, because I
it
think
as
they know
optimistic
that
as-
it's not
as-
going to happen. So why talk about a plan that's not realistic?
Well, even if it's realistic,
Like the
you have to have a
NHL plan that some guy came up with, which we'll talk about
Well.
in a few minutes. But I think we've beat this horse dead.
Well, and there's one more little thing we're going to talk about. CFL the Raiders actually released a former
Moncrief.
Raider, Derek
Yeah.
Moncrief, 26 years
that.
old, man. He's got some good ball maybe left in him. He might catch on somewhere else down there, but the linebacking core with the Raiders was, everybody talked about how shitty it was last year. So maybe there's not a lot of people that think, he's got what it takes to play down there.
Well, and you can't
those
work anybody
comments and
out
that
or
assessment,
anything.
but I
Or
mean-
it'd be a good, if I was O'Day, I'd be waiting and make that phone call.
Yeah, somebody will pick him up if he doesn't stick somewhere else in the NFL there. So
That's right.
anyway, just good player, good situation. Hopefully he can find himself in. So UFC.
Right on. So we had some actual live sports on television. So who took it in live and who just watched the highlights after? I was a highlights
took
guy.
it. I was a highlights guy. I mean, I had things going on at the time.
Yeah.
I couldn't actually tune in live, but I mean, not too many of the fights, and I follow the fight stuff fairly close, I would say, pretty decently, boxing included, but not too many of the fights were like big headliner type names or card guys. There's a couple that interest me, but for the most part, undercard type quality guys, decent fights, but just not the name power. But yeah, Florida green lighted the whole thing and away we go. Right. So, did you guys see that one guy did test positive for COVID-19 though?
Yep. And then
So-
they got him out of there, right?
How much mainstream media, I guess, is sort of the part of the question here for me, but they all were like, oh my God, the fucking UFC, it's all on them. Okay, hold on though. Everybody wants a scapegoat. Fair enough. And something was kind of fucked up in that situation. So somebody has to wear that blame one way or the other. That's the accountability of it all, right? So they had their protocols in place. But who designed their protocols and their process? It was a little flawed, got exposed as a little flawed, right? So He comes down there. He's from Florida. He's from Jacksonville. Drives down to where the event's being held. Gets there, right, 2 days before weigh-in. Says he's been in a household where somebody tested positive for COVID. He's been around it. Okay? Part of their protocols, they test them. So they test them. It takes about a day and a half till they get results. In the meantime, he was in isolation. So that's that's the right call. He's in isolation until such time. Well, they go ahead with the weigh-ins and they kept the social distance, and you see all the fighters with gloves on, masks on, 6 feet on either side of Dana, the whole thing. They're doing this stare down, which whatever, when you're 15 feet apart really isn't much. But at the same time, right after the stare down, what does he get back? The test results. He's positive, and 2 of his team is positive. So, yeah, the UFC kind of screwed up here. Because the second the guy says he's exposed to it and walks in the building, for sure you have to test him. So they did that right? But at the same time, this guy knows he's going to do this fight. Could he not isolate himself in some way, shape, or form away from anybody? Like he didn't maybe properly isolate? That's on the fighter. Right? So the UFC does the right thing. They get him tested. He isolates. So they're doing it all by the book. That's a good way to do it, right? As far as most people are concerned. Why the fuck did they do the stare down?
Yeah.
Without knowing the test results? What's the good of the isolation if you bring them out of isolation? That was baffling to me. So whoever was in charge of that process kind of got a couple steps fucked up and flipped, in my opinion. So the UFC kind of has to wear the fact that, what the fuck were you doing at a stare down? Like, why was he out of isolation? So they got to wear that one. That was a screw up on their part. But at the same time, they remove him from the card afterwards, and, the fight goes on with a different fighter. And now he's in isolation. But why is that guy showing up to a UFC event knowing he was exposed? He could have got tested at home before he even went down there.
You would think
so. Because if
so.
you're around somebody who has COVID, would you not go in and get tested?
Well, Dana wanted the event more than anything else.
And I mean, but how much babysitting does the UFC have to do of these guys? If it's been all over the media, the government's been all over everybody about, well, if you've been in contact with someone, and he knowingly was in contact with someone who was actually positive. It wasn't a suspicious, well, maybe. They were positive. Wouldn't you do the right thing and get tested? That fighter needs a good kick in the ass, because potentially he exposed a lot of people that didn't need to be exposed.
Yep.
For what reason? He goes down there, it's greedy, whatever you want to call it. But the UFC in the whole process also screwed up. So, watching the mainstream media and some of the bigger outfits go after the UFC about it, you're like, this guy fucked up, and the UFC cannot control everything that guy does. That's just society, right? Like, would you blame the government about every person who had COVID who accidentally went outside or even intentionally went outside? They're not responsible for every single person's movement. So, yeah, they both got to wear blame on that. It was kind of tiresome to kind of hear about, in my opinion, that it was all one guy's fault. There's so many layers to this shit that there's there's portions of blame to go around for a lot of people. So the guy was 40 years old too, so it's probably his last fight. That's my thought is, this is the last time I might get paid to do this. I'm gonna go make my money
no matter what.
Yeah, but he put other people at risk, right? I mean, how many months have you heard, don't put others at risk? Like, do the right thing, isolate, shelter in place, whatever you want to call it. So, whatever, but kind of a fucked up situation. But they were the first ones to go ahead and try to have a live event. So, and from what I could tell, the event went well.
I think it went pretty well, and some of the fighters might actually say that we should not have fans anymore, i.e. Greg Hardy.
And that I understood that point very clearly. Like, I mean,
that was great.
That is something that gets lost in the mix of a big crowd, right? Is hearing your trainer and getting those things. And he said even the fight commentators.
Well, that's who he heard. He heard Cormier tell him what he should do, so he changed up his strategy.
Yeah.
Because normally he wouldn't have heard it.
Right. So, that maybe there are some perks to that, right?
I think the excitement, though, was lost a little bit without, especially like after that big knockout from Nagano or whatever his name is, that 20-second one, the fist throwing competition, because that's all that was. Holy crap. Those weren't punches. It was just a bunch of fists flying. But that was awesome to watch, though. But you would like to see the crowd go nuts after that.
Oh, for sure. Well, like we said a few podcasts ago, you guys were talking about, doing live music events. The crowd adds something. It just does. For these guys, that adrenaline spike goes way higher, way longer. It's way better for all intents and purposes if you're in a situation like that, I would think, right? Like,
well,
ramp up
why
the
you do it,
intensity,
right?
get that crowd going.
Well, it's kind of part of the reason they're professional athletes, right? It's not just about the cash. It's about the fans. It's about the having everybody screaming your name and wanting to see you. That's kind of what it's about.
Yeah, and I mean, that adrenaline spike, I mean, you see people who are jumping out of planes and doing all kinds of, they're junkies for that adrenaline spike, right? So, I mean, that feeling of euphoria that you get, I mean, there's really no other substitute. So that's your thing. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens when their next one happens. Is it going to be in Florida again? I didn't really
I would assume it's
next step,
probably they're the only ones who are allowing it right now, and I think the next one's like isn't it only a couple of weeks away or something? It's fairly quick.
Yeah, they're fairly quick. Yeah, so
I believe it is
all in good fun.
Yep, right
all
on.
in good fun. But you guys want to move to some NHL?
Let's move to the NHL.
Yeah, shall we start with our friend Mr. Leipsic? Or do you want to talk about the AHL season being canceled?
Well, I think you just did. Now we're done.
Then we're done. Okay. Moving on to the NFL. No, just kidding. No, Brandon Leipsic, and I guess, he's taking most of the heat for this because he probably said the most, obviously, but Jack Rodewald of the Senators was also part of these group texts that went out. He was hacked. There were private conversations. It was all released, leaked, whatever you want to call it, out to the masses in some way, shape, or form, right? I don't know. Did you guys ever find the comments? Like, did you ever read through them all?
I saw some of the comments.
Yeah. I saw very few of them. I looked and had a hell of a time trying to find actually what was said. So it's really hard to make a judgment on it. But at the same time, I went, man, if it's probably not worth it. Just, like, why do I even have to read it if it's that toxic, right? So and that's that's sort of the thing though too. Like, I mean, Twitter, I went and looked there. Like, Twitter was any link that said here they are on Twitter. Like, it was posted on Twitter. It seems like, oh yeah, stripped right down, gone. You can't read this tweet, or the account in general is even gone or suspended. Like, completely pulled out of some places, right? So that it was tough to track down if you were looking to read. I read it the day after it happened, so there was obviously a lot easier to get that content. But it was pulled down a couple of days after. It was actually hard to find in a lot of ways. Yeah, so, it really was.
Not impossible, but tough, right? But part of it is though too, like, he's a fourth line guy with the Capitals.
Making minimum, eh?
Fourth line for life kind of thing, right? So
but he's calling his other line mates what a bunch of fucking losers, eh?
Yeah, and part of it is too. It's like, there's various parts, and everybody's saying, well, the whole thing's fucking horrible. It's horrible. He should have never said any of that shit, And then there's guys like Brett Hull that are coming out going, well, the NHL's no fun anymore. Like, guys can't even go out and have a beer with other guys because they're under so much scrutiny all the time. You can't even go out for beers with your line mates. Not that they'd say stuff like that, but I mean, they can't even go out. These kids are kind of pathetic, basically, as far as Hull was concerned, because they all take their Xbox on the road and just stay in the hotel. But it's a totally different day and age. But at the same time, how ridiculous has it gotten, I think, is maybe some of his point in that, though, too, right? Like, that these guys have to hole up in the hotel and play Xbox. Like, they should be able to go out for a meal.
It's the world we live in.
And be reasonable, right? Like, you know, it's kind of sad in a sense. But I mean, sad. In terms of what he said, there are some things that are completely over the line, for sure. But then there's a few things where you're kind of like, I know people are upset about that, but I mean, the fuck was wrong with that? Like, not everything he said was offensive, but that's the picture that's being painted, right? So,
it depends what your line of offense is these days, though.
Well,
everybody's offended by everything.
They all race to be offended, and then when they all get to the finish line, we're all offended. No, I'm the most offended. I'm more offended than you're offended. Oh, come on. Quit making it a contest as to how offended you are, how quickly you're offended. But part of it is there's a few lines that he did cross, obviously, right? But in terms of like saying stuff about teammates, not every teammate likes every teammate they've ever had. So, you know, I don't like that he called his teammates losers, but I mean, fuck, I've been on a ton of hockey teams, and I'll tell you right now, some of the guys I played with, they're fucking losers, and they probably say the same about me. We don't all get along.
They do. So you know.
You know, they call each other losers. That to me was completely not a problem, you know? And if the guy doesn't like it, well, the next time you play him, dance it off at center ice.
So like, where does it become these were private group texts and somebody stole them, whereas nobody would know about them if somebody hadn't stole them?
Who's the guy that leaked it? Why are they not going after him? That's an invasion of privacy.
That's not how,
right?
it's not how it works these days. That's not a juicy story. That's not a juicy story.
Well,
true, but
don't get me wrong. I am not agreeing with what he said.
No,
it's just like, because you do nowadays, you have to think of what you put in a text to somebody now, because you don't know if they're going to take a screen cap of it and then send it off to somebody else, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, maybe you got to be a little smarter about what you're doing, and obviously he wasn't that smart about it, but I mean, some of the comments he made about, you know, other guys' wives, that's bullshit. Like, that's a line you don't cross, especially when you're playing with the guy or have even played with the guy. I'll tell certain ex-teammates, you know, we didn't get along. I think they're losing. I'm not saying shit about his wife, though. That's just a line you don't cross, right?
Do you think Avery crossed the line then with Fanook back a number of years back there?
A little bit, but it was
seconds line, yeah. Well, yeah, because they're rivals. He's trying to trash talk, right? I thought that was okay, personally.
And it didn't offend me. I actually thought it was hilarious.
Offended with that one, yeah. I laughed.
But Avery was a guy who did cross lines, and maybe not that one, but I mean...
This is a different kind of line they're crossing, though, with the fat shaming and shit like that, and, like, yeah.
But, I mean, I've sat on benches in games beside teammates who I drank many beers with, and I wouldn't make a comment about one of the guys on our team's wives, but I might about somebody else. There's fans sometimes in the stands at games, years ago. You know, there's fans there, and it's like, look at her. She's a rocket. Look at her. No way. Like, things get said. But he put it in text form, maybe.
Yeah, you got to be smart enough to not put things in writing these days or on podcasts, unless you want people to actually, like, call you on it.
Well, I think, no, that's the thing, is that you're allowed to think whatever you want, and you're allowed to say whatever you want, but people are also allowed to call you on your shit, right? And so, I mean, I think the biggest thing is not to, like, necessarily censor yourself. It's just, don't be a dickhead, right? And if you fuck up, learn from it and be accountable for it, right?
For sure.
Try and make atonements. And I mean, that's how you, but that's the only way to get around that kind of thing, I think. Like, I don't think you around careful about what you say everywhere, right? Because eventually you're going to trip yourself up, right?
Right.
But I mean, if you it's a pretty simple thing to just not be a dickhead, right?
Well, but even if you're going to be a dickhead, just know that there's some kind of accountability that you're going to have to show for it potentially at some
There may be
sometime.
consequences down the road. Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Exactly. So, I mean, part of it is though too, you know, and he's a Canadian kid from Winnipeg, you know, but at the same time, he's been in the States.
Explains a lot.
Yeah, it's Winnipeg.
A pegger. Well, I can't say anything bad about a pegger. Someone will be offended and they'll all race to the finish line to see who's the most offended.
Maybe we'll get more viewers.
I will never stop saying bad things about anything related to Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Winnipeg.
I was waiting for you to say something bad about Winnipeg, but anyway, we'll move on. Is it a violation though? Because it was in the States, right? He's in the States, everything else. Like, is it a free speech violation? Is there a case to be made that just because you don't like what he says?
Yeah, but he's not going to jail for anything, so it's not a criminal act. All it is his employer did not like the publicity that they got from a fourth line player, and they're like, screw this, sayonara, buddy, you're not worth it.
Absolutely.
Because if that would have come out with a
modern employment contract,
first line center, same thing happens to a first line center, and I bet you this is all handled completely differently.
Well, and I was going to bring that up maybe a little later, but I mean, in terms of the contract stipulations, right? Ben Roethlisberger in the motorcycle and he crashed it, and it's like he's not wearing a helmet. They write into his contract that he can't ride a motorcycle, right? Mm-hmm. You can't say whatever the fuck you want on social media, or you know, like there's a standard here that you've got to live up to. So terminating his contract makes perfect sense because it's probably wrote in there in some way, right? So, but I mean, in terms of the amount of heat he's taking in the general public, right? These people being so massively offended. Well, he's actually kind of allowed to say shit. Like free speech is still something
and they are entitled to be offended.
And what's being lost in my mind a little bit with the free speech side of it, at the very least, is what comes first. I'll ask you both this question.
The chicken.
Okay. I ordered a chicken and an egg from Amazon. We'll see which one comes first. No, just kidding. I saw that today somewhere. Anyway, no, but in terms of free speech, is your right to be offended, does that supersede my right to free speech?
Yeah, but his right to free speech was not.
What are those?
Yeah.
How are those mutually
his right to free speech was not impeded.
Okay, because some people are offended, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And is their right to be offended the thing that we have to follow on all of it, right? Like, I mean, does that mean that you cancel somebody? Does that mean you can basically scrub this guy out of the hockey community because he said this? And that's essentially what it is. Like, he's going to get blackballed is what they're talking about, you know, and never get another pro contract everywhere. Like, he's done in the NHL, let's face that.
That's of the choice.
Hockey? Can you cancel this guy's ability to be gainfully employed at what he does?
Go ahead, Matt.
It doesn't help that he was barely gainfully employed to start, right?
But I mean, that was the top league. There's many other leagues,
thread, right? So I mean, they're gonna punt his ass out of town. But I mean, I don't think those are mutually exclusive. Like, just because somebody has a right to say something, I mean, the whole principles of free speech means you have the right to say what you wish and not, be arrested,
consequence,
or go to jail,
right.
Like.
But that's all I'm.
I don't think that goes to like employment contracts, because I don't think anybody's going to argue that if you tell your boss to fuck off, he's not within his rights to fire you, right?
Right.
You can't say, well, you violated my rights to, like, I don't think that I may be wrong. I'm not a legal scholar, but in my understanding is that, yeah, it relates more to those kind of political oppression type things as opposed to,
more, I'm talking more in the general public sense, not as contract, right? Well, I think every time you have a conversation,
people get offended every time Donald Trump makes a speech, right? But he still has those rights to say the speech.
But all you're really talking about is the loud minority who gets offended. I don't think if you actually got the opinion of everybody that this would be a big deal. They go, yeah, stupid kid, screwed up, lost his job. But I don't think anybody would look at it and go, I don't think the majority are looking at it and go, yeah, this kid can never play hockey anywhere ever again or be gainfully employed. But he's certainly paying a price in this time and day and age for being a shithead.
Right. But that's what
lesson
some of these
learned,
media
kid.
outlets
Lesson
are
learned.
basically saying is they want this guy to never play hockey again.
Yeah, but this, like I said, it's a loud minority.
And at what point does that minority get told, hold the fuck on, you better read the rule book again?
That is up to the employer of whoever decides to
beyond
employ
the employer.
him.
I'm talking general public here, because that's where it's being consumed, is in the general public.
Yeah,
and
but
these
you can't go by the general public.
Pushing it in the media. You know, they want this guy, you know, the sensationalized headlines of like basically canceling this guy or just getting him out of hockey altogether. He'll never, like, making sure he can't get a hockey job.
Sure. To repeat what you said, or what I said earlier, that it's not it's not that this guy is never going to, well, I don't know, he might never play hockey again. I don't know.
Brendan says, I think the team was looking to get rid of him and this opened the door for them. I tend to agree. Same thing as what happened to Don Cherry. I think they were looking to get rid of him, and here's an opportunity. Because, like, the severity wasn't the biggest issue. It was, yeah, we're looking to get rid of you anyway. Here's an opportunity. See ya.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. But, I mean, who really knows when it comes to a fourth-line guy if they're really gunning to get rid of him? I mean, they change fourth-liners like socks, some teams. I mean,
true.
You know, but by all estimates, he was a solid, you know, fourth-line checker that could play 200 feet and get his 8 minutes a night. But
he wasn't worth.
Not going to say they didn't want to. They wanted to keep him either. But I mean, very valid point by Brendan. But
I guess he certainly wasn't worth fighting the PR battle for.
Right. Now, if somebody like pick a star. We'll pick on a Flames guy maybe. If Johnny Gaudreau looks across the rink and he says, "Man, look at her, what a pig," because it's basically what Leipsic said, right? He called a woman a pig. Does Johnny Gaudreau never get to play in the NHL again?
Well, here's the thing: is I think it's important that we give them the opportunity. In anybody, I think deserves, and that's what I'm talking about when we talk about, is he never going to play? Is he going to play? Is you have to give people the opportunity to rehab, and I can think of two prominent examples. Just when we were sitting there, just in the last couple of minutes, I went, who's done that? And there's two real distinct ones I can think of. Is Kobe Bryant really worked very hard to rehabilitate his image after some real bad publicity and some shitty incidents when he was really young, and Michael Vick. Michael Vick worked real hard to do his penance and, show atonement. And
You're also talking about guys who were like top 3 in their sport, in their league at the time of the incident too. But I know what you're saying too, right?
Sure,
but they did have to get that chance. And I don't disagree. You should get the chance.
But yeah, everybody I think deserves that opportunity, and some guys will take it and some guys won't. But I know I've seen it in some cases where it does turn out to be something that's almost really inspirational when it really does work out, right? So.
Well, and even to go into the hockey side of it, I mean, you give a guy a chance to say, you know, the right thing, or to say that, you know what, I didn't do the right thing here. I said something I shouldn't have said, or I said it wrong even. Right? Don Cherry is a prime example. They gave him the opportunity to apologize, and he didn't. Now, I wish Don would have came out and clarified a little sooner or a little better what he was trying to say. Some people understood it a little bit better than others in terms of what he was trying to say. Some didn't want to. But it was too late. The sensationalization of the situation and his delay in saying anything at all, it was too late. The window was missed. But I mean, he had an opportunity to clarify comments and maybe have a second chance on the whole thing. Bill Peters, there's another one with the Flames, right? That's basically, told you're fired because you can't do this shit. Bill Peters is now gainfully employed again in a professional hockey coach position, not the NHL.
In Europe or something, right?
Yeah. But I mean, he also came out and said, you know what? I did something wrong. I want to make it right. I'm going to go through the right steps. I'll be a better person for this. Mm-hmm. But that's just general accountability. So
that's what a good person does.
Right. So, and that's the thing. Nobody gets to really show sometimes that they're a good person because the cancel culture's canceled them and they never get to actually have the platform or the opportunity to prove people wrong. Right? Like, rather than race to be offended, why don't we just race to let the guy have a chance to rehab? Give that person an opportunity, right? So, I mean,
but remember, you got to in order to get to that point where you can rehab, though, you have to get knocked down. You have to be able to be knocked down, right?
Right.
And I mean,
you have to be accountable.
You can't say Michael Vick didn't get knocked in the gutter by going to jail, right?
Oh, for sure, totally. That's probably the harshest, in terms of dealing with what happened. He had the harshest price to pay. But he paid the price. So, he was accountable for it.
So this guy loses his job immediately. I don't think you can necessarily say that's unfair, but then give him an opportunity. You can't say he'll never play again. Give him an opportunity to learn from it and, maybe make something bigger of it.
Yeah, and I think he's saying that the powers that be are saying that he shouldn't get another chance.
Right. Well, and we can't bow to these, very vocal few that want him canceled. You should give him the opportunity to rehabilitate and get himself right and be accountable. I think it's more important that you hear somebody be accountable for the mistake than it is to cancel them, to get rid of them. You can't cast people aside. There's good in everybody. Maybe he just needs to be tuned into the right station.
But they do have the choice to cast them aside, just as much as he has the choice to say whatever the hell he wants.
True, but when
that doesn't mean he doesn't get another chance. We've all been fired. Well, at least I've been fired from jobs, and you know what? I'm still gainfully employed because you know what? You learn from those things. You go, oh, geez, that was a wake up call. Guess can't do that.
Sometimes you're fired unjustly. Sometimes you know exactly why you were fired.
Exactly.
But you get to be accountable for that.
You still get a learning lesson from both of them, by the way.
Yeah, and I think this guy needs to have an opportunity to be accountable and then potentially rehabilitate himself in some way. And maybe he gets another opportunity. I mean, he's not that old, but I mean, I don't think that he should be basically squished out of existence in the hockey community.
Well,
fucked up and give him a shot.
In closing on Mr. Leipsic, I didn't know who the hell he was until this story. So you are now more famous than you were before. Good job.
Bro.
But let's quickly tie up the NHL here with the we'll chat a little bit about Ontario opening up their pro sports facilities and their protocols.
Which was unique. A little unexpected as far as I was concerned. I knew it was coming at some point, but I didn't think it'd be this soon. I know there's a lot of people and a lot of dollars tied up, a lot of jobs even tied up with, pro sports, but I don't know. There's some leagues that are also saying that they want everybody can come back to the facility when every team can come back to the facility for competitive reasons, right? Like, in Saskatchewan, it's pretty safe. It would be unfair if the Riders had training camp going on and nobody else could start one for a month. It's unfair. There's an unfair advantage to it. So I get that aspect of it too, right? But yeah, I mean, you guys maybe want to talk a little more about the protocols. You can hammer away at that. But I was a little shocked that they were opening them. I mean...
Well, but really, are they? Because it's like one guy at a time.
But it was...
One guy at a time on the court. And I heard conflicting reports because one report I heard said no coaches. And the other one I heard you could have one coach, one player and one coach on the floor at a time, and it was like a maximum of like 3 players in the building at one time. It's like, what's the point?
Oh, right, yeah, and
What's
they
the
can't
point?
really, they can't really do
Well, that was
practices or
what's the point?
that was no scrimmaging and that kind of thing. Like the NBA kind of released that a week or two ago now, and you're kind of like, and I had made the point, like, why the fuck would you even go? Like, it just
What's the
didn't make
point?
sense to me. It's like, all I need is a pair
Absolutely.
of sneakers and a hoop in the back, or
And
somewhere
if
in
you're
my
a
neighborhood I
professional
can go to. I can
basketball
do my own
player and you
thing,
don't have a
you
hoop
know?
in your backyard, there's something wrong.
Exactly. So, I mean, to me, it was a little different with like soccer or hockey because it's a little different dynamic to the sport, right? Like getting your timing down on a hockey rink and getting your legs back and that kind of thing, and the timing and speed and positioning with soccer, like there's a little more intricacy to the team part of it, I guess. Not that NBA doesn't, but I mean, it's keeping your skills sharp is not as hard in the NBA. You don't need quite the specialized equipment, I guess, like you would for hockey. But what's their protocol on testing? How are they testing these guys? Where are they being
they're still
isolated?
only at the testing of if you have symptoms.
It's kind of like general society. Testing for symptoms is only part of the equation. You have to actually test for antibodies now. Like if the entire Toronto Raptors team tested for antibodies and they all had them, full team practice, let's go. Completely changes how the whole thing runs, right? Like, I don't know. It just seems half-baked.
All of it seems half-baked. All of it seems very desperate. A lot of desperation to try and make something happen.
And this is just sort of something I top of my head kind of thing, but do you feel like some of these leagues want to be the first one back?
Absolutely.
Because of the massive amount of money, not just the money, but the massive amount of fans you can gain
that means
by being first.
That means money. Why do you think Dana's been pushing this so hard, man?
Oh, well,
he's got people.
Dana,
he's got bills to pay. He's got shareholders to answer to.
Well, and that's the thing. That's the guy who's pushing. That's the guy who's really pushing.
Yep.
Like Dana's kind of there. Dana used to be part of the decision-making process more so on the corporate side. These guys, he's the manager now. He's the GM. He gets dictated to way more, I'm sure of it. But I mean,
he gets paid handsomely to do that, but
he does, right? So if they say we're having an event, they're having an event. Dana or no Dana, I think is maybe, preferably with him. But more the point with this, my thing is you look at a market like Toronto. You've got the Argos, you've got the Leafs, you've got the Raptors, you've got Toronto FC. Like you've got 4 or 5 competing pro sports teams in that market. There's big gains to be made potentially with fan base and limited dollars in people's pockets too. What are they going to spend it on? The first thing back. There's a grab. That's a marketing grab in its own right, as far as I'm concerned. So part of these half-baked schemes to me are, we just want to be first. They don't want to be right. Right? Like you saw the UFC where their protocol kind of fell apart a little bit. I'm not looking for right. I'm looking for first.
Just like the news.
As much as you don't hear the NBA and the NHL and the NFL all talking about it, they're all competing with each other for less of the entertainment dollars out there because we're all a little poorer, right? So,
sure. I think it's like the entertain or the sports world kind of has just paused, right? And so there's this massive hole in the business opportunity of it, and so all of these leagues are sitting there waiting, like, chomping at the bit because they want to be first to market so they can get their foothold in essentially what is a brand new market again as it reopens, right? And people are reinvigorated into the sports world, right?
Or
and
you don't want to be left behind and people move on to something else.
Well, and I'm a perfect example
yeah.
of that. I'll give you the example. When the NHL locked, I'm still a hardcore NHL guy. But when the NHL had their lockout season, I was a little angry about it, being an
Oh, I
NHL
was
guy.
pissed.
But at
After
the
my
same time, I'm
fucking
sitting there going, I'm
Flames came
kind
so
of
short in 04.
But I mean, I'm sitting there going, I'm a bit of an NBA fan. Well, it's on all the time because there's no hockey to watch. Now I watch as much NBA as I do NHL, and I watch a lot of sports when it's on. But I mean, I tune into specific games in the middle of the season with the NBA, and I'd have never done that before.
I'd agree.
You
The
know?
NHL
So
lockout also made me watch way more NBA.
Right. So there's a void there. So did they get, all of the NHL crowd to become NBA fans? No. But there's
But they took some of
15% of them that can be convinced to maybe do both all of a sudden.
Absolutely.
Some said NHL's up their ass. 5% might have said, I'm never going back. Right. So, but there's big gains. There's big gains to be made in that situation. And I'm personally think that's part of the reason they're going back as quick as they can. There's a race to get back first.
It's like the space race, eh?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's more important to be first than right. And that's not really the way that the government or people are being told to act. So that's where you're kind of saying that's counter to what we're being told, And if they're not adhering to the same social distancing and protocols that everybody else is, they could stand to lose a lot of people too.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of fringe people, they tune in when it's a big deal and it hits the main part of the news cycle. They otherwise don't pay attention. Those people, those fringe fans, are just going to say, you're a bunch of fucking assholes. I'm out of here.
Yep,
they could lose too. And I don't think they look at that. But to me, that void, Maddie talked about that void. They're trying to fill it.
Right on.
The money. Anyway.
Let's move on to a little bit of just more entertaining NFL news, and we'll let Heath tell you all about this one.
Well, I don't know if everybody knows who Dave Portnoy is.
Tell us, Heath. Tell us.
Some might not, but he is the owner of Barstool Sports. So another podcast out there, Spittin' Chiclets being one of them. They're becoming a bigger and a bigger entity, right? But they're out there. They're very popular. They're kind of the dudes kind of media outlet. That's kind of their appeal, I guess, in a lot of ways. But Portnoy, if you ever get a chance to listen to him talk, he's a pretty straight up dude. He'll call spades. He's not too worried if he offends a few people. He's not going out of his way to do it, but he just says what he thinks, and then it's worked out for him. He's got a pretty successful business there. But anyway, Dave Portnoy and the NFL don't get along. He was at Super Bowl, got arrested as a paying customer, and arrested and thrown out. Like, the NFL and Barstool do not get along. His staff, his reporters, whatever you want to call them, journalists. Can you even use the word journalist anymore?
Whatever you want to call them.
Whatever you want to call them.
Loose term, right? But
tweet machines.
The Barstool Sports entity in any shape or form is not welcome at NFL events. They're not credentialed. They're held out, right? They're pushed aside. So they were having a charity auction, the NFL was. Goodell put up a one-on-one viewing of a Monday Night Football game in his man cave where he did the draft. And Dave Portnoy bought it.
Fantastic.
Is that fucking awesome or what?
That's a great
cool
drop.
$250,000.
You cannot avoid me now is basically what's happening, right? So anyway, he Portnoy was like over the moon. He's like, let's make some fucking kids' dreams come true or some other things like that. But he paid $250,000 for this.
To watch a game with a guy he despises.
It's a 4-hour event, so I mean, like dollars per hour that he spent. But he said he was willing to go as high as 7 figures without even blinking. He was willing to drop.
You got the money.
Yeah, he was willing to drop $1 million. He said so. Yeah, he's one who does not pull punches, and he said he will not be pulling punches when he goes. I have some thoughts as to whether or not he's actually going to get to. Goodell, you guys know the NFL. It's protect the shield at all costs, right? That's their mantra, basically. Well, this could be potentially very damaging. And
So you
I
don't
don't
think there's going
know.
to be a live stream from Goodell's basement?
Well, here's the thing.
That'd be
Portnoy
great.
said he's walking in with a GoPro. Like, he is going to be strapped with live feed. I don't know where he's going to present it, but, I mean, there will be video. But does Goodell go through with this and wear the egg on his face for whatever happens? Because, I mean, it'll be embarrassing. Knowing Portnoy and watching him and hearing him, he will come for him. It will be tough, uncomfortable questions. So to watch Goodell squirm would be fucking awesome.
This sounds like this sounds like a Republican politician agreeing to do a opinion or a fluff piece with the Daily Show, eh?
Yeah.
And then they go, I can't believe that's what you did with me.
Yeah. Well, and then the other side of it is,
what the fuck did you expect?
It's $250,000 for charity. Like, if Goodell pulls out, he looks like a total asshole about the charity side of it. He doesn't look like a man of his word. Like, he is trapped. It's a rock and a hard place, because he either wears egg on his face as to what happens at the event, or he wears the egg on his face for pulling out of the fucking event. Portnoy played. Oh, he played his ace, man. Portnoy played his ace. He's got him. So I don't know who is going to be playing on that Monday Night Football game. I don't even give a shit. The better show will be that live stream. Guaranteed.
He's going to be tuned in, for sure.
It could be Brady going back to New England. I'm watching that. I'm watching Goodell squirm with a Coke and a bag of Cheetos while Portnoy asks him why he got arrested at the Super Bowl. That is fucking awesome TV. Nice. So, I mean, yeah. He wasn't even going to blink at seven figures, though. They asked him, he's like, I'd have went seven figures. Wouldn't even blink.
That's pretty funny.
That's awesome. So, I don't know. Ball's in Goodell's court. We'll see what happens.
Kudos to Portnoy.
Kudos.
Yeah, well played.
Moving on to our last story of the evening. The NBA.
A little Zion. Kyle's a Zion guy.
I love Zion. And I think somebody tried to first pull a fast one on young Zion and his family. And then when they got caught, now they're just doing whatever they can to try and get some money out of somebody. That's my take of it. So basically, well, what's your thoughts? Okay, so I guess to everybody out there who's not in on it. So Zion Williamson from the New Orleans Pelicans, the #1 draft pick from last year, played for Duke, I believe it was just before he got drafted, right? He signed with this Prime Sports Marketing Agency. A 5-year contract.
Yep.
At the end of the day, this contract is extremely illegal, and the agency is not licensed to even be an agency. So Zion signs with a bigger and better agency. Now,
fully certified, yeah.
Fully certified. Now, the agency and some crazy lady are trying to sue for $100 million. And that's not going very well. So now they've decided to say that Zion and his parents are basically being paid by everybody in their dog shoe company to play at Duke.
Yeah. They were receiving funds to play at Duke, and that's illegal in the NCAA, right?
Right.
Shoe company
said by
school.
One fraudulent agency person.
So,
well, I've never heard any rumors to that effect of those types of things before.
That doesn't happen in the NCAA. It's completely up and up.
Yeah. I mean, you shouldn't even have to give back the trophies you win, right? Reggie Bush.
That's right. Do I think that stuff does go on, and probably some of that went on? Yes, we all know that is.
Yeah.
But this, to me, really smells like some shady folks that thought they could pull a fast one on somebody, and now are trying to do whatever they can to squeeze some money out of a young guy who's making some money.
And is going to make a lot more money, right? So, and having said that, though, I mean, these guys weren't certified, is why he ended up going to another agency. If they were ever hoping to get certified or represent any other major athlete,
That ain't happening now.
what the fuck are you doing to your business here, man? Like, that was probably the stupidest move ever, you know?
So,
And I'm not saying be quiet about the corruption, just, you know.
can somebody tell me what you said it's a sports marketing agency?
Well,
So basically, they're who
agents,
gets
right?
you your endorsement deals.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
But
It's an agency.
he's not
so
but he's not allowed to do that until after he's out of the NCAA, correct?
once he declares for the draft,
Right.
he's allowed to hire
Yes,
somebody.
it was like a week before the draft. He was already.
But he hired someone who wasn't certified. So now he's trying to get out of that. They're trying to sue him for breach of contract.
So it was later then. I was under the impression that it was early on, and I was really not understanding why this kid was hiring an agent so early and for what purpose, right? Because
no, the stuff that happened early is they're saying
deals and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
They're saying he was offered money by Nike, or not him, but his mother and his stepfather were given money for him to play at Duke, and apparently Adidas also, which seems weird, but yeah, so
Part of it is, though, too,
it seems a little weird. It seems a little shady.
There's talk that, you know, if Duke was handing out money or if Duke knew anything about it, you know, in terms of the money being handed out. I mean, USC, Reggie Bush, even if USC doesn't give the money, they gave his parents a house and, you know, that the agency, all that. If they know about it in any way, shape, or form, they get punished. And USC did in the Reggie Bush instance. How much is going to come back on Duke?
Well, if it's true, they could be in some serious trouble.
Oh yeah,
well, and they're
absolutely,
they're a huge program, right? Like they're a top end program in the NCAA basketball community. Well, so is USC at the time for Reggie Bush and, you know, football and everything
Absolutely.
else. They've never really gotten their shit together again. Like they've never really got to that upper echelon again. Like this is so damaging to Duke potentially if they get a 5-year, you know, suspension limited amount of scholarships, all that kind of stuff, which the NCAA will probably do if they find anything, you know, that they can hold Duke responsible for. Like it can wreck a program flat out.
Only if they want it to.
Fair enough. But at the same time, there's also talk of the NCAA athletes potentially in future getting paid because they're not. They're student athletes. They don't get paid for playing the sport.
Right.
But, you know, and there's a lot of people that think, well, they should get paid, you know. Fair enough. I don't disagree, and I can understand both sides of that argument. But more the point is if you did pay these guys, even minimum wage, okay, is this going to stop?
No, because you still want to incentivize them to come to your school or whatever, right?
Right. There's still going to be backdoor deals, right? So.
Well, I mean, remember the program, right? Yep. They're at the party with the boosters, and everybody's handing them envelopes full of cash and shit, right? And
yeah,
that kind of shit, I do believe, really truly goes on.
At this point, why do these players even need to go to college? Like a guy like Zion, why does he even need to go play college ball?
Well,
why? Because he's required. He's required.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, why? Oh, right, because it makes the NCAA a shit ton of money.
Well, and here's the other side of it, though, too, right? Because, yes, they're required, but now they're trying to change the rules in terms of like, okay, you don't have to go to college. You can go play in the G League, and you have to play there for a year. Then you can go to the NBA. And there's all kinds of people in the NBA are saying, well, they're just not mature enough to handle the pro league. Like, they're too young. They're not ready. It's, but the G League is a developmental league. Now, this coming season's draft for the NBA, the number 1 overall pick is going to be LaMelo Ball. Most likely. He's the prohibitive favorite to go number 1. Where'd he go to college? He played mostly in Australia as a pro, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's developed in a professional league at a very young age, 18, 19 years old, worked on his game, got himself to the point, bang, he's in the draft. And hard to argue with him going number 1 overall that it's a failure to do it that way. For every Kwame, there's a Kobe, right? Remember Kwame when the Wizards had him?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was too young, couldn't handle it, whatever. But then you have Kobe who comes in and Hall of Famer, right? So, I mean,
it's fun. There's just to me, there's just fundamentally a problem when the universities are using these kids to make millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
When those kids, they're not there for the education. We all know that. So what's the point? What's the point? Either pay them, or we don't need college athletics.
Well,
if you're an athlete, you're an athlete.
Maybe we should get back to emphasizing education a little bit more.
If you're an athlete, you're an athlete. Train. There's all kinds of specialty athletic schools. Go to those. You're there to train to be an athlete. Not you're taking the place of some other student because you're an exceptional basketball player. Then because you're an exceptional basketball player, the school is going to make a bunch of money and you're not going to get paid. You get hurt, you're screwed.
Part of it is for basketball and football in particular at the college level, those programs generate so much money. And truly, those guys that generate that money should maybe get a portion of that. But there's a lot of that money that also goes into the programming for other sports. You can't tell me the water polo team at Duke is going to make enough money at their gate-driven type situation. And the scholarships that go with that are also out of the funds that the football or the basketball team make. So it's sort of, it subsidizes, but at the same time, they should be paid to some degree, at least for their own likeness. Like when they're put into an NCAA football game or basketball video game, they should get paid for their likeness.
Or they're selling jerseys with their name on it.
Yeah.
Or their number, right?
Right. So, I mean, there's ways to let them benefit from how well they do as an athlete. And, and it would be in the name of being fair, though, too, right? So, I mean, part of it is, though, too, is you look at it and it's like Zion. I don't know what his parents did for a living or anything, though, either. But they also willingly accepted the bribe. Some kids aren't coming from
allegedly.
Some are.
Allegedly.
Right. But, I mean, you look at the Kachuk boys in hockey, right?
I love your grin.
Allegedly.
But, I mean, you got, like, the Kachuk boys in the NHL. Their dad's already a millionaire. So, really, are you going to slip him a little bit of money and get him to come? Nah, it's not going to work. He doesn't need the money, right? Some people need the money, so they fall victim very easily to the bribes. But at the same time, they accepted the bribe. So there's a little responsibility on that too, right? They have to know when they accept that bribe, they may be damaging their child's career opportunities. Not everybody goes number 1 overall. So
there are a lot of poor people too who are principled enough, who would know enough to say no to that sort of thing too. So I mean, you're right. That is definitely there's a certain indictment on a person's character for sure.
Yeah, so. It isn't just Duke. It isn't just Adidas that wears it. It's the parents too. Like there's little bits of blame to go around for everybody. And I mean, if you're Zion and your parents are doing that, maybe you can even tell them, stop. Tell Adidas to stop. You're a very good basketball player and you're going to make millions of dollars in a year. I might not need to take your $50,000 to maybe sign with your shoe company. I know it's tempting. It's easy for me to say from here, I guess. But some guys are not maybe going to make the NBA, potentially. They'll take that money, right? They're not going to wait for the 2 in the bush, 1 in the hand. So I don't know, but the model may be changing with the G League being potentially a place these guys can go straight out of high school, get the exceptional player status like they do in junior hockey, right? Like that kind of idea. Maybe only a select few or one or two per team. Guys maybe starting to go to Australia or Croatia or other good European leagues, Italy, develop their comeback. So, yeah, the NCAA is sort of like the NFL in my mind. They guard the shield very adamantly,
And
right?
corrupt as hell.
Corrupt as fuck, man. I mean, those guys pass down judgments and they're probably getting something put in their pocket themselves.
For sure.
You know, not all of them, but probably pretty close to the same percentage of athletes that are. The hypocrisy stinks.
Yeah, exactly.
But
well,
anyway.
that's one of the things that that disappoints me with like, I mean, when you look at hockey players in particular, typically a lot of them go the junior route. Whereas in football and basketball, it tends to be more through universities and colleges. And that's, to me, always been one of the bonuses of those sports, right? Is that because we all know pro sports doesn't last a lifetime. And even the guys who make a shit ton of money either piss it away or still find out, holy crap, I retired and I still got a half a lifetime ahead of me. Even if I've got all the money in the world, I still need to figure out what the fuck I need to do in my life, right? And so I think that's always one of those really important things that guys at least come out with a college degree at the end of it. Although you find out that too many times they don't even finish their damn degrees because they've just been led down the hallway through enough years of eligibility to get them to the end and get them to the draft, right?
Yeah. And I you know, and just to sort of to speak to that even just a hair more, the ability to prioritize your financial situation or decision-making process completely is dependent on your education level. It is. They factually have done studies to prove that. So guys with a lower education don't do as well with money. They just don't. So
well, I could just tell you that I can guarantee you that somebody who goes from high school to being a high-profile, professional, well-paid professional athlete to then being like retired at 30 or 35 is going to have a hell of a time trying to figure out fucking life skills compared to somebody who've spent 4 years in college learning and getting a degree, understanding problem solving and abstract thoughts and critical thinking.
Totally. Living on your own, even in college, teaches you lessons that you can't learn. But I mean, you've seen it though too with hockey players who drop out in grade 10 because they're going to make millions, and some of them do make millions. But the guy who drops out in grade 10 isn't maybe going to have the skills and the decision making and the logic and enough so that he's going to make those millions last, right? So your education level and how you financially prioritize go hand in hand.
And actually, it gives me great hope for humanity when I see some of these guys making really smart decisions for their lives, and you know, maybe stepping away from professional sports sometimes to pursue a real career. Like I think about what's his face from the Stampeders who retired to go be a doctor, right? You know, like he had the world at his feet, and he could have still done that, but he's like, no, this is my calling. I need to go do this. This is more important.
Well,
and I'll probably make more money at it.
Right, and I mean, some guys make a bigger name outside of their sport afterwards, right? I mean, we're talking about our all-time CFL teams, right? The all-Canadian teams. Normie Kwong, he was freaking lieutenant governor of Alberta. You know, he did very well in everything
also,
he
Don
did.
Getty was premier.
You know, and I mean, and he happened to be a stud of a running back in the 60s. Like, you know, it's not even his primary calling card to some degree anymore as a person, right? So, I mean,
I love those guys like that are like, like somebody like Ken Dryden, right? Who's not only a pro athlete but a freaking author and a motivational speaker, and now a fucking senator and
Yeah, so I mean, they
MP,
do.
sorry.
But where does that all start from? It isn't just his hockey career. It started out by being a very well-educated guy at some point too, or taking education seriously. So
I think that's absolutely huge, and I think it doesn't get enough importance. Like we look at the sports aspect of college sports all too often, and we lose the fact. And that's something that I've noticed, that like we give the Canadian university sports a lot of flack sometimes, but I hear them use the term student athlete a lot more than I hear that term used down south. And I think that's a positive distinction.
And and in various sports, at say the U of R right here in town, right? I know in different sports, some of the coaching staff for some of the different sports, and they genuinely do put some onus on that student side of it. They definitely do. So you can talk about various colleges in the States. Can't speak to that, but they obviously don't put the same prioritization in place for that kind of stuff. They do here. They definitely do here.
Just make sure he's academically eligible, damn it.
Yeah. Mama made me go back for year 4 to get the degree. But anyway.
That's right.
I digress.
Well, that was a good show, guys, for not having a lot of things to talk about.
All right.
But there's always seems to be something to talk about. So that's
maybe
always
next
good.
week we can talk about how much money the CFL got.
Maybe. Or maybe that you were right and there's going to be a truncated season. We just don't know.
Maybe.
We
Who
just
knows?
don't know. But
when
until
you get a check that big, though, should you get it on like the billboard size where you can hold it up like the lottery winnings? Like you win $20 million in the lottery, you get a big check. Maybe Ambrosi will go on TV with a big check.
A glitter check.
Oh, that would be funny.
Nice big glitter check. It's made of glitter, man.
We have a little signing ceremony with Trudeau and Ambrosi.
Oh, that'd be great.
6 feet away from each other with masks on.
I know so many people would be so excited about that. But anyways.
I think one of them is sitting to your immediate right on the video right now. Well, maybe not. On my video anyways.
Yeah. But I digress. That's our show for the week, folks. As always, we're the Above Average Joes, and I'm Kyle, and up there's Heath, and up there's Matt, and we'll see you guys next week. Laters.
Laters.